Okay, well, I'm going to hand it over to Pat Connors. He's the VP of Planning for Platte River Power Authority. I'll let you do your bio.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, my name is Pat Connors. I'm Vice President of Power Supply. I'm in charge of planning, operations, and some customer service programs for Platte River. I've been at Platte River. I've only been at Platte River for about a year and a half. Before that, I was with a joint action agency in Wisconsin called WPPI Energy, doing something very similar. We're a similar organization as Platte River I came from, and so this was a natural fit for me. It's a great location, and it's a good location for renewables. So Platte River is really excited about the renewable program we have, and we're looking forward to accommodating even more in the future. And we'll talk about that, as well as talk about some of the limitations and obstacles that we're trying to make sure we try to overcome to do more renewables. I want to touch on that as well in the presentation. So I thought I don't expect you to read this, but I just wanted to touch on who Platte River is. So I'm sure most of you know we're the wholesale supplier for 4 municipal utilities here in the Front Range in northern Colorado: Fort Collins, Loveland, Longmont, and Estes Park. Our peak load is about 661 megawatts in 2017. I think we peaked this summer at 686. And we're quite a bit, compared to Piesco in Colorado, they're about a 6,000 megawatt utility. So, we're small, but yet we're big enough where we can do a lot of things, a lot of interesting things as well. Our load has been growing on a peak demand a little bit, maybe 1.5% a year, but our energy usage is about 3.3 gigawatt hours, 3,300,000 megawatt hours. That has been fairly stable over the last 4 or 5 years. It has not increased, has not decreased. It's really been very stable. I'm sure that has a lot to do with a lot of the energy conservation and programs that we've implemented over the years, and just the good work of all our municipal utilities. That's just off-system sales. We have surplus capacity and energy, and so we make other utilities. I probably should just say, just for the sake of getting through the presentation, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but I was told that if we could leave the real technical questions to the end, clarifying questions, I get into the acronym jargon, please stop me and ask questions on that. But if we can get into more of the technical stuff, maybe at the end of the presentation. I'll stay as long as there are questions. Just again, a little bit more about our history. We were one of the first utilities, and we were the first utility in Colorado that actually implemented and did some renewables back in 1998. We did a small amount. They were obviously very expensive back then. So we did a little bit at Medicine Bow over 3 years, 98, 99, 2000. We were growing by leaps and bounds. We had to put in some gas peaking units in 2002 and 2004 just to handle the peaking needs of the utility. 2005, we did some more wind at Medicine Bow, put in another peaker in 2008. Silver Sage, 2009, another 12 megawatt wind project, probably our most expensive renewable resource on our system, significantly more than the one so we put another 60 megawatts of wind. Prices came down significantly in 2014, probably about half of the price of the wind in 2019. So we did a large chunk of wind in 2014 of 60 megawatts. And solar was starting to look attractive, and so we did a 30 megawatt project up at our Rawhide plant. If you go up there, you can see the large solar field up there. That was done in 2016. Really, I just want to kind of stress, we're really interested in doing more renewables. We want to do more renewables. Clearly, the prices have come down, and they're very attractive, and it makes a lot of sense. We also want to make sure we're meeting reliability. I think that's our number one objective as a joint action agency serving, generation and transmission service to our members. We want to make sure it's reliable. No one wants to have to turn their lights, air conditioners off in the summertime because we don't have enough electricity. So that is, one of our paramount responsibilities. And we also want to be financially, sustainable. We want to make sure that we're doing something that is good in the long term. It doesn't make us, if we would have done renewables, a lot of renewables back in 2009 when they were really expensive, I mean, we wouldn't be able to afford to do as many of the renewables that we do today, that we're doing today. And so that's one thing. We want to make sure what we're doing is financially responsible. We're going to be at about 50% carbon free, and I'll dive into that a little bit more in some future slides, what exactly that means, carbon free versus renewables. And obviously we have a growing interest in our members wanting us to do more. And obviously our members own us, and we'll do what our members want, but we just, we'll also try to make sure we do the right thing as well. I wanted to put this slide in here just because I will give you a sense of kind of where the U.S. is in renewables. The solid lines is kind of where the U.S. is in terms of wind and solar. So this is wind. So I mean, in the U.S., we're getting to be about 10% of a capacity is being served by wind. Solar is quite a bit lower than that. It's only down at about 2%. And then the dashed lines is kind of where Platte River is and where we're heading. And so this is the blue dashed line is our wind projections. So we'll be up over 20% named capacity, and solar around 6-5%. And I'll dive a little bit more into that. But just to give you a perspective, we're still significantly, I'm into the jargon, I guess. Sorry.
Don't you have hydro?
We do have, and I'll talk about that in a slide coming up. So we do have some hydro, but some people, they don't call that renewables. Some people don't. So I'll touch on that here in a slide. So one of the exciting new renewable resources we entered into, we did a contract here earlier in the year that we did announcement on, called the Roundhouse or wind project. It's 150 megawatts of wind. That's about 75 of those large wind turbines that will be installed. It's going to be, we have an option for an additional 75 megawatts more that we have to exercise by the end of this year if we want to do that. We're working with, Enyo is responsible for the permitting of the project, and so they're working on that with the city and other stakeholders and we're, the target is to get all the permitting and easements in place before the end of 19. And then we'll do the construction in 2020. And it's about a 9-10 month construction window to complete the construction. So by the end of 2020, it'll come online. It's about a 20-mile transmission line as well that will, and I have a picture of here a little bit more about where this project is located. Here's the Wyoming-Colorado border. We have a Rawhide substation is about 14 miles south of the border. This is Weld County and Larimer County borders right here. Here's I-25. And so the wind turbines, the 75 wind turbines will be installed up here in Wyoming. They're not sure exactly where yet. They're still doing some profiling of all the wind to see where the best locations are. But it'll be somewhere in that footprint where the 75 turbines. It looks like the wind is a little bit better as you go further north and west, but not a big difference. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. The transmission line will get built. It'll be a radial line. It'll come from out of Rawhide. We have 4 transmission lines coming in. This is where our large energy center is today. We have 400 megawatts of peaking units, gas units, and the 300 megawatts of coal at Rawhide. So the transmission line, they're looking at various options. It's likely, I would say, based on just looking at it, is that the transmission line will, this is where the collector substation is going to be for all the wind turbines. The line's likely to come, go east, south, maybe along the, even a little bit into Weld County. And then there's a rail and kind of an old road bed that kind of cuts diagonally down this way down to Rawhide. And it's likely, I would say, that it would probably go along one of those corridors. But they're working through with stakeholders to try to figure out what the least impactful route for the transmission line.
How much of that footprint will this take up?
Of the wind turbines?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to be spread out quite a bit, the wind turbines. So, I mean, I think they said that they could accommodate probably twice as much wind in that footprint. So, I guess half of the available space.
So just to clarify that green area that you have there, is that soapstone?
That is soapstone, right? That is, and so we were obviously trying to, try to get us, away from that. But there's other reasons too to come along over here as well. I mean, it does seem like that's the least impactful.
And also kind of contiguous to soapstone on the Laramie County side, Wyoming side, is a bunch of Cheyenne open space as well. Does that impact this?
They will have to get approvals in Wyoming as well to site those wind turbines. So they will take that into account during the siting process and the permitting process in Wyoming. I wouldn't like to make a pitch here. I mean, we think this is an exciting project. We hope, if you support the project, we'd like to hear from you as well. Because obviously I'm sure there will be people who don't like certain aspects of the project. Yeah.
Can you tell us who the other partners in that project might be?
Well, I mean, Enyo is the contractor in building it. I mean, they obviously have strong financial background with others. I mean, no, we are and that was one of the things we insisted on. We think this is a great transmission line to a great location, and we insisted on that. That they have to sell the output, and we have to take the output from this project. So we're unique in this area. I mean, we've got good wind and good solar, and it's right in our system, so we don't incur the congestion and the delivery risk that the other utilities incur to move their wind to their load.
You transmitting AC or DC?
This will be all AC on the transmission line. Obviously, the wind turbines produce at DC. It'll get converted right before the collector substation. It'll get converted to AC. At the wind turbines, basically, it gets converted to AC and comes. So it flows AC on the lines.
What voltage level?
The transmission line is going to be 230 kV. Okay. We're also doing another project. We're in the process of doing the contracting for it right now. We're doing another 20 megawatts of solar up at Rawhide substation, and we're also looking at doing a little bit of battery storage. Not that it's economical, but we really want to start learning the technology and starting getting the systems in place so that we can do more batteries as the costs come down in the future. So the solar project is 20 megawatts. It seemed to be the right amount. You start getting a significant amount of the economies of scale when you get to 20 megawatts or larger. So we wanted to do a fairly large project to get the economies of scale. It'll serve about 1.5% of our member load when the solar project comes on, versus the wind project, which is about 17 to 18% of our total member load will be served by that wind project that I just talked about.
Who are you partnering with on battery storage?
We haven't announced it yet on who it is, but we hope to have it contracted done by the end of this summer, early fall. So we'll be announcing it at that point. But we did get a lot of proposals from all of the key developers, and it'll be a tier 1 battery company. So the solar is enough for to serve about 5,500 homes. The batteries we're just looking at a 2 to 5 megawatt hour batteries storage. So that's we talked about 3 million megawatt hours of energy. I mean we're talking a very little bit of battery. Can discharge, over 2 hours. It can fully discharge the battery in a couple hours is what we're looking at, and we're really trying to get some operational experience with the battery. I wanted to put a picture of a battery in here just so people had a sense of what that is. These are about the size of a semi-truck trailer, and it's 2 megawatt hours. So that's what most of that is battery. There's also an air conditioner in there as well to keep the batteries cool. but it doesn't have any of the controls or anything like that. This is just basically the battery, and it's just a 2 megawatt hour battery. We think we need, to have space in between the 2 megawatts. We need about 500 square feet for every 2 megawatt hours of battery. I don't know, these are lithium-ion batteries. Depending on how you use the battery, you can, if you use it aggressively, you fully charge and discharge it twice a day, you probably only have 6 to 8 years of life on the battery, where you got to then replace it. If you kind of only use it once a day, and during the summer when you really need it, and you only use it 60% of the capability during the other days, you might be able to get 12, 13 years of life on that battery. In addition, the battery decreases no matter how you use it. It's really decreasing 2.5% a year as well. So you got to replace them or cells quite frequently, and so there's a replacement program as well. So it starts adding up a lot when you start talking about batteries.
Do you know the voltage of those batteries?
The voltage. I know the one we were talking to him about. We're connecting into the distribution system, but the batteries are fairly high voltage. I don't know right offhand exactly what they are, but they're fairly high voltage.
You'd have to have an inverter to go with it.
Oh yeah, they all got inverters built. We're making sure we can parallel the grid with the batteries, and so it's going to be charged by the solar, but it's going to get out onto the grid and then go back to charge the battery. So we could charge it from the grid in the future. So we're trying to get as much information and learning as much as we can from this technology. Just to kind of, in summary, to kind of give you where we're at and where we're heading on renewables. I'm colorblind, so I'm going to struggle here with a little bit on the colors. I think this is green. I have no idea what color this is. So, and this is okay. So this is the hydro that we had a question on. We do have a lot of purchases. About 18% of our energy for our members comes from large-scale federal hydro projects, WAPA, Western Area Power Administration. Those are very attractive projects, long-term contracts. Some people don't think of them as renewables. We think they're carbon-free, and so we talk about how much carbon-free resources we have. And so when we just use that term to include our hydro plus our renewables. So we're about 30%. So today, we've got about 10% of our powers come from renewables, which is wind and solar, and then about 18% from the hydro. The hydro stays pretty constant because our energy projections are staying pretty constant. And then we start bumping up. We do a little more solar in 2020, and then we do a little more solar in 2021, and then a lot more wind in 2021. So we get up to about 50% carbon-free. Of that carbon-free, about 30% is renewables, and then about 18% is the hydro. So.
How much of your hydropower comes off the North Platte plants?
The North Platte.
Yeah.
This is all Colorado.
It's all Colorado. Okay.
Yeah, it's all WAPA on the Colorado River system. So we take, we get off all the major dams on the Colorado River.
I was going to say it's fairly local up there. Of course, shipping is
Yeah.
fairly free.
Well, I don't know exactly where that interconnects. If it happens to be, if it's north of us at Rawhide, we're probably got a wheel transmission. So WAPA has transmission, and so if we're buying from WAPA, we can use their system to get it to our system. I slide on just kind of where our other future resources that we're obviously looking at. Wind and solar, paramount, number one, resources we're looking at because the prices have come down significantly. We did the project, the wind projects continue to drop. We're able to do this new wind project with fairly little impact on our costs because the project's costs have come down. The solar project, we did the project in 2016. Prices have probably dropped in half already on the solar project. The prices have come down. Fairly comparable. to a point where it's getting to be almost break even on the solar for the next increment. That doesn't mean the future increments are going to be break even, and I'll talk about that as well. We also are considering and have to consider natural gas because, you know, wind and solar are intermittent. And when I mean intermittent, I mean the wind and solar, you know, if the wind's not blowing, you're not getting any output. If the sun's not shining, you're not getting any output. So we have to have something in place when those days occur, when those times occur, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And obviously hydro is something, I don't think you're going to be able to do big hydro projects anymore. I don't think they're going to be cost effective. Maybe some pump storage. I'm not sure that's going to be, and people are going to be accepting that either. And pump storage is basically you're creating a reservoir both at top of the mountain, you know, above on the top of the hill and at the bottom of the hill, so that you basically, when you have excess power, you can pump the water up to the top of the hill, and when you need power, you run it down just like a hydro facility, and you get power out that way. And there's a number of those facilities. Not a lot have been built recently, but there's a number of those facilities around the country. Something to consider. And then other distributed energy resources that battery systems, demand, you know, load control. I think controlling electric vehicles, charging them when the sun's out or when the wind's blowing, and trying to shift that to the right times. I think that, I mean, so it's, I think to really figure this out and figure out how to plan for this is going to be a lot more complicated than it was in the future, and it's going to be a little bit of everything. It's not going to be, there's no one answer and one panacea, one easy way to do this. They all have limitations that we can talk about here in these next. I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. People know what the pros and the cons are of these resources. I'll just kind of point out maybe the key ones. For wind, it's carbon free is a pro. It's sustainable. It's competitive. It's a very mature industry now. But the intermittency, you know, if the wind's not blowing, you still need power, and so that is the #1 limitation to wind and solar. Solar is very similar to wind. You know, the wind and the solar are good complements of each other, and I'll show some pictures of that. I mean, typically when the summer when the sun is out, the wind is low, and the wind blows a lot more at night than it does during the day. But the wind also blows more in the spring when you don't need it with the load, and it blows less during the summer. Obviously, new hydro and the battery energy storage systems. There's other ones we'll certainly want to consider, and like I said, it'll be a little bit of all of these things to make our portfolio and make it sustainable and cost effective. I think the battery storage, and I'll get a little bit on the pricing on this. I mean, I think the biggest downside on the batteries is you just need so many of them to make it really a dent in what you really need to make all of this work together. And I got a few graphs on that. And the cost is still pretty high, but hopefully coming down. It is coming down, but and I'll touch on that a little bit more. I wanted to kind of just also kind of talk a little bit about how we're going to fit all these together, resources. And this is what our load looks like. July during the summer, this is a typical summer day, warm summer day. Loads ramp up all day. Middle of the afternoon, it kind of peaks, and then slowly trails off in the evening as things cool down, as people finish cooking, things. So that's very typical. Winter time, it's a little different shape. The loads are a little flatter. You have the heating load, lights and stuff coming on during the day, and then everyone comes home at night cooking and stuff, and you get this peak kind of in the late afternoon in the winter, and so that's a typical day, and it doesn't mean every day is like that, but it kind of gives you an idea what the loads look like in the winter, and then there's a fall day. It's basically just you don't get that much difference between on peak and off peak during the spring and fall. I mean, that's kind of what it looks like. So it kind of gives you an idea, how we're going to try to fit resources together to serve that load. This is what wind can look like. In January, you can have a lot of windy times, but then there'll be, and I think I need to probably, these are hourly average numbers, so I've just got 24 points along here, and so it somewhat dampens some of the things that are going on. You don't get the significant changes that really are occurring on the system that we got to balance to, but it gives you an idea of what happens. And I don't know if there's ever any typical day in January. This is just a day I picked using our load.
That's just one random day?
One random day in January,
Okay, 'cause I'm
24 hours.
wondering why when the low hours,
Yeah.
100%.
I think if you use averages for a month, it softens it too much, and you can't really see what's going on. So I picked one day for each of these months, and so I mean, it gives you an idea. And then I think what happened here in July is that the wind probably got going. Once it gets to about 60 miles an hour, all the wind turbines cut out. And so what probably happened here is, the wind turbines probably start, cutting out, and they basically dropped to zero because the wind was blowing too much. And so they all cut out to protect themselves, and then the wind started dying down, and then all of a sudden they ramped back up again to almost full load. And I put this as kind of at 100%, just as nominal, no matter how much wind you have. I just used, did it as a percentage to kind of give you an idea how things look. And then in October, summer again. Typically, you don't have that much wind. This just happens to be a day in July that I picked has a lot of wind, but that is not typical. And in the fall, we typically have a little more wind than this, and it's just the day that I happen to pick. Just to show what happens. This happened to be a day where, the middle of the day when middle of the day you didn't get hardly any wind. You just got it in the early in the day and late in the day, and that's not unusual in the fall and in the summer. And so it complements nicely with the solar because that's typically when the solar is coming on. And so here's the typical solar graphs for one day. January, obviously you don't get as much sun. It shows up a little later. Sun's coming up a little later. It sets a little earlier, and so you don't get you get a little sliver, kind of in the middle of the day in a January. That's a typical one day in January for solar. This is this is a day. I mean, there can be days where we could cap out here at 100% and stay 100% all day. This probably had some clouds coming through, and so it just dropped off a little bit here and there. Maybe it was somewhat of a cloudy day here in this day. And then here's an October day that was probably fairly clear day in October. You can see it's a little narrower. And so, you get it during this. You get it during the day, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, maybe as early as 7. It starts ramping up in the summer, maybe a little later in the spring, and probably not until 9 o'clock in January. So I mean I just want to stress that these renewable resources, they're intermittent. Obviously, you can back them down. I mean, we can curtail them. We can reduce the output. That's no problem. Obviously, we can't increase the output if there's no wind or no sun, but we can always curtail. And so, if we do overproduce, we can protect ourselves there. We just can't protect ourselves when there's no wind or no sun, and there's no way to get more output. And so that's an issue that we're always.
With your contracts, you're still paying for that, right?
Yeah, and that.
It's kind of like,
No, that's a stress that, I mean, that's one thing I wanted to point out next is that, even though we had to curtail it, these costs of these wind turbines and solar projects, they're fixed. I mean, the developers assume that they're going to get so much production out of those wind turbines and solar, and they're very good at predicting it. They know on average over a year how much output they're going to get from a wind turbine or a solar plant. And so they price it, taking their fixed costs, knowing what they need to, what they need to earn on it. They can come up with a price for a PPA, how much we need to pay for every megawatt hour, for every energy that's produced from those wind turbines and solar panels. They know how much we have to pay. So if we don't buy it, we effectively still have to pay them for that power, because they are assuming that revenue in order to cover their debt costs and all of their costs to cover their fixed costs.
Can't they put that on a bigger grid and fend it away someplace?
They can, and we can do that. But typically, when there's a lot of excess, everyone's excess, and so there's really no market for it. And that's what I wanted to talk about next. Is here I did a couple examples here. This is kind of if we served the Platte River load with all wind and solar, so 400 megawatts of wind and 600 megawatts of solar. I mean, that's significantly more than what we're planning on doing. But if we did, this is what it would look like. And this is more of a typical summer day. You get a lot of solar, and actually, and you get our load is less. So this is solar, and so we got more solar, and so yeah, we could sell it. In this time of the if there's not too much, and if no one else is overproducing, but if everyone's doing the same thing and everyone's putting in a lot of renewables, a lot of solar, everyone's going to be excess. But we're ahead of the curve, so we probably have a market for it for a while. But eventually, if everyone has to do this or does it, then there is going to be no market for it. And
Batteries.
you could charge batteries, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then you basically charge batteries, and then you could use it here where the white is. Winter, a similar situation. You got more wind in the winter. You got less solar, but it fits out. But you still need more here. One thing I would point out here is, we had 660 megawatts of peak during this time, but at our, using utility nomenclature, our ending 19, which is 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock at night, we still needed 580 megawatts here to serve that load, because there's no solar and there's no sun, and so we needed 580 megawatts of something there to serve that load that day. If there would have been wind, that would have taken up, but in summer, sometimes there's not a lot of wind. I mean, I'd say half the days there's probably not much wind during the summer. Similar in winter, actually does pretty well. Nice, actually, correlation between the wind and the solar until you get to the late afternoon. And just when we peak during the winter is just, in this day is when the solar is dropping off, and so you don't have that much wind, and so you got to fill that in somehow with market, someone else's wind potentially, if they're surplus, maybe some batteries. And then you get into the spring. In the spring is when you get, this was a day I picked in late spring when the sun was, pretty high in the horizon, and so you got pretty good solar, and you got pretty good wind in the spring. I mean, that's typically when you get most of the wind. And so you can see what happens in that day. We had 400 megawatts of wind and 600 megawatts of solar all on. And unfortunately, our load is the lowest in the spring. And so we got, and we could try to sell it, and will be a market for a few more years. There'll still probably be a market, but eventually, if everyone does it, I mean, there's going to be no market at that point, and we'll have to curtail, and that's no problem. We can curtail. It's going to increase our costs, but we can curtail down to this level. So this day, it fits pretty good. Don't need a lot of storage, and spring we can be self-sufficient. When Piesco says they had a day where 70%, I think their record is 75% of their total load was served by renewables one day. Well, it was in a spring day, I'm sure, when that happened. Load was light, renewables were high. Fall, again, This is typical, not a lot of, the wind can be, can be very, this is typical winter or fall days. You get wind overnight, but you don't get wind much of any other times. And so you got all these.
Those are still random days?
These are just still random days. We're somewhat random, but I also tried to pick days that were somewhat typical, not totally random, but I mean, it was kind of what I tried to pick as a typical, but they're still, I mean, these are actual days, and I just took our wind and our solar and I scaled them up to get to these levels.
Oh, by the time you get these battery systems, your initial battery systems in place, anybody thought about how much solar vehicles would be connected to the grid at that same time? I was thinking about if you could incentivize charging
Yeah.
with solar vehicles, for these
Yeah, I mean, that is,
smart
like I've
meters.
said, is it's going to be a little bit of everything. We got to control the load. We got to make sure your electric vehicles are being charged at the right times. Like here, we want electric vehicles being charged probably here, or charging batteries if we have the ability, and try to avoid, charging at certain other times. I mean, we think that is the solution. Is a lot of things have to be done, and that's where you need a smart grid, a smart system, and some really sophisticated controls to make sure that all those things are being done. A lot of communication systems need to get in place. That's not in. There's no one has that capability today. Utilities are just now trying to figure this out.
So the new smart meters, how do they fit into being able to do that?
Well, I think it helps us get two-way communication, so we'll have the communication ability, but we don't have the systems in place to send that communication to into the smart grid, or for us to take the signal and actually make sense out of it at the utility side. But that stuff's that's coming.
Well, and the other piece of that is how you send the market signals with your tariffs to
Yeah,
your customers.
sure. I mean, we're definitely going to. That's all got to fit together. It's all got to work. And Fort Collins is trying to do some of that. It's going to take more than just that, I think. It's going to be more real-time pricing, not just on-peak, off-peak pricing, I think, in the end.
If you were to add hydro into these graphs,
Yeah,
at what level would that raise up the baseline?
our hydro on average is about, 80, 90 megawatts on average, but again, it's not shapeable. You can't just take more on, when you want it during those white periods. It's got to be, there's restrictions on it because there are a lot of them is run of the river kind of hydro, and so there's not infinite store. We have a little bit of storage, a little bit of shaping that we can do, but not a lot. So we can't just fill in the white period, the white spaces with it. It'll look more like just a sliver at the bottom that covers. It's pretty much flat schedule. And so then you get into managing those, all of those resources. And just to my examples, these are just examples. And so I was just trying to come up with, well, how many megawatt hours of storage would you need to fill in that white space? And in a summer day, it's 6,000 megawatt hours. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't pick some hours here and then charge the batteries other hours, but you're not charging it a lot in this day. A little bit here, but it's not going to even come close to filling in this area or even filling in this area. And we still have all of this, which is the real critical period that you're trying to serve. So you're going to need some gas units that day, probably to serve it. Similarly on the winter, you need 2,400 megawatts. So what does that mean in storage? First on the spring, you didn't need much storage. You need a little bit here, I guess a little bit there. And in the fall, you needed some here and here. You can charge some of it here. So you need storage, you can charge, and that's probably enough to serve this load if you had enough batteries. So I think I just calculated it as kind of how much storage would you need here, just to kind of get an idea. I was just trying to this is not perfection here. This was just to kind of give you a frame of reference on how much storage would you need and how much would that cost. And then, so I took a look at how much storage costs. And People remember about a year ago, Tesla did a 100 megawatt hour battery in Australia, and they announced they're going to do it in 2 months, which is great. And then you can do batteries fairly quickly. They're all on, they're fairly self-contained. You can just plop them down and put them in pretty quick. They spent about $500 a kW on those batteries. That was, everyone thought those were unbelievably low cost at that time. That was a little while ago. And if we did that for that summer day, that would cost us $3 billion for storage. For that, and that doesn't even get you. What happens if you have 3 days, 7 days in a row that doesn't have much sun? That doesn't come close to solving the problem. But and I just put in another number. Well, what happens if batteries come down to $200 a kW? And I think it's possible that you could, in a few years, you could get that to that point. And we're still at about $1.2 billion for those batteries. And if you think about, how much we've spent on all of our power plants, we've spent about $1.2 billion on all of our power plants. And probably, that's total plant. I think we have, net plant after depreciation now about $800 million on our books. So if we did $1.2 billion of batteries, our rates would probably go up 75%. Just to give you an idea what that would cost, our wholesale rate. So our rate would go from 6 cents, to close to 10, 11 cents at wholesale. Just to give you, that's at $200 a kW, which I'm hoping we get there in a few years. I don't know if we will. I don't know if we'll get there or not.
What would the equivalent coal be for that to generate that? Cost of the coal.
Well,
to displace the battery.
First of all, no one's going to build more coal.
No one?
For a lot of reasons. No one's. But you could buy a peaking plant for 300 megawatt peaking plant. It would cost you probably it would cost you close to $500 million. No more than $500 million for to effectively do more than the battery does, and to have something that's going to be there and perform, when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. Hopefully we won't have to use it much. Hopefully the market, there's other opportunities and other things to do it. But just to give you kind of a frame of reference what this stuff costs.
And the plants that we already own be used to back up?
Yes, and we certainly don't want to get rid of our peaking plants, because they definitely can back up and provide some energy. But peaking plants, the energy gets to be expensive, particularly if gas prices increase significantly over time. It works today because gas is just really cheap. But if in the future, maybe gas isn't going to be quite as cheap. And so, those heat rate, they're not that efficient. As a combined cycle, as a new gas plant. So it's definitely something we're considering. So in addition to that, you also have the batteries decreasing in life, very quickly as well. So, just in terms of, not only do you have the PPA costs for renewables, you also have, there's some transmission, there's balancing, there's a significant amount of balancing costs as well for renewables. Because someone's got to make sure they have generation available if that wind cuts out, as well. Same with the solar. And you got your transmission and delivery costs as well. So some of the kind of the key takeaways are, I just want to point out, when the wind's not blowing, and the sun's not shining, that's probably likely to be when the prices in the market are going to be the highest in the future. As PSCo's announced, they're going to do a lot more solar and wind. We're going to do more. I expect that to be when the prices in the market are the highest is when the wind and the solar are not producing much, and the market prices will be lowest when the wind and the solar are producing a lot of output. So. We can curtail renewables when the output's high, and which is not a problem, and that's definitely going to be, there's definitely going to be some of that, but it will result in higher costs than what you're seeing people announce what cost of renewables are. There's other hidden costs that there is for renewables in the future if you're going to have to do a lot of curtailment, and we don't forecast a lot of that. Even with the 150 megawatts of wind, we can accommodate that with our load and resources pretty well. And so we won't expect much, if hardly any, curtailments. But it's really the next increments above that where you're going to start seeing maybe more curtailments in this area.
Yeah. I mean, earlier you said that your customer, the city's own Platte River, right? And they are asking for more renewables. Longmont has already passed a resolution for 100% renewables by 2030. We hope that Fort Collins will do that later this year as well. You've got a number of the biggest customers of Fort Collins utilities, including CSU, who have made commitments and who are also requesting a green tariff. So, I mean, and you're taking a big step with that 150 megawatt in your project.
Yeah.
You also mentioned you've got a 75 megawatt option on that this year. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the thought process and the timeline for making a decision, because you're already going to have to build the transmission line. There are going to be all those fixed costs and all of the permitting that has to be done, and you've got the opportunity for an additional 75 megawatts of wind that would allow you to meet the demand of your customers for more renewable resources. So, and
Yeah.
where are you in that process?
Yeah, I mean, we've got an option on the 75, as you said. We have to make a decision by the end of this year on that additional 75, if we want to do it or not. The transmission cost that you talked about is sunk. That's about 10% of the cost of of that project is the transmission line. So another 90% would be an additional cost or so to do more of that wind. And it's really not so much, it's a decision, can we accommodate it? How much risk are we taking? How much how much additional renewables are we really getting to serve our load? Or are we going to end up curtailing a lot of it? I mean, how much, those are the kind of things we're looking at. And, what the value might be in the market for 5 years, 10 years for that additional wind if we can't use it. So that's one thing. Clearly, green tariff, and we can talk about green tariff, and I can get into that a little bit more. That's probably another question, or if people want to talk about that. But I'm going to save that one for a little bit later.
So just to be clear, right, if you turn down the option for the additional 75, it doesn't preclude you from building more wind up there in the future, does
Right,
it?
that is right. I mean,
But you lose
we lose the
benefit of the tax credits and some, I mean, there are other reasons to
Right.
do it this year. That will not
the tax credits don't just end, they phase out. And so we've got the ability to at least get some of the tax credit. And prices might come down as well for the wind to offset some of that. But chances are the price will be a little bit higher if we would wait for, 5 years and did it. But there's also, bringing it on early also has risks as well, that we just want to make sure we understand it, and we want to make sure our members and our customers understand what that risk is.
You've kind of given lip service to distributed resources, but all of the planning that you're talking about is big utility scale projects. It seems to me that the solution is to really focus on distributed resources, smaller but distributed throughout the system, then you don't have transmission costs associated with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, go back to that graph, though. I mean, even if you did have distributed resources, the profile isn't going to look any better than this. As a matter of fact, the solar, and you can't do wind distributed, really. The solar is going to look worse than this because this is single axis tracking solar. So we're tilting the axis towards the sun in the morning and towards the sun in the evening. The fixed axis stuff on rooftops is going to look a lot narrower than that. And your price is going to be 3 times as high as our large-scale solar.
And you have no transmission costs associated.
Well, you still have transmission costs to serve that 580 megawatts that I talked about. You're still going to need something to serve it, that load. So if you don't avoid transmission, you might be able to reduce your transmission costs a little bit in the future. But we're talking 10, 20% reduction, not 100% reduction in transmission costs.
And
Because you still need transmission to serve that 580 that I talked about.
I totally accept that we need gas peaker plants as a bridge.
Mhm.
Question is, how quickly can we move away from that?
And that's going to be on technology, and how, we can have this distributed energy resources. We can have that infrastructure. But we don't have that infrastructure in place yet to really control all of this load out there and try to shift load to when we can serve it. And so over time, maybe.
Green Mountain Power back east has already been a virtual power plant comprised of individual distributed solar plants on homes. And
If they're putting storage in, someone's incurring that cost of that storage that I talked about.
everything costs.
Yeah, we can do it. It's just a matter of price. If people want to pay, you can do that. I just think that it's something we've got to make sure we know what we're getting into, and everyone understands what we're
If we
doing.
knew what we were getting into, we wouldn't have been subsidizing coal for the last 100 years.
But-
We knew what we were getting into, but the politicians didn't.
I'm not gonna.
How much would a regional market, a big regional market, allow you to get away from some of these problems here? If the wind's not blowing here, but it's blowing in Kansas, then
Yeah,
basically you could get your power from there.
That is one of the areas we're really focusing on. We're disappointed that Piesco pulled out of the market. This would really, we think we could accommodate, that option easily. We can do more. We probably are going to still have some of these issues. Maybe, we just have the market to help us fill in some of these gaps. And so we think that would have really been beneficial. It wouldn't have gotten us to 100% renewables, but it probably would get us, we can get to 50% without a market fairly reasonably. We might be able to get to 60%. We don't know. We haven't done all the analysis. But with a market, we probably could have gotten to 70, maybe even to 80%, penetration of renewables fairly easily with a market. But that without the market, and obviously we're working very hard to try to get a market. That would be my quick, rough answer to that. Don't hold me to those kind of numbers, but it gives you kind of an idea of what a market would have done for us.
Okay, I'd like to talk about a little bit different situation that is being played out right now. A lot of people, or some people, are starting to get electric cars. We can charge our car in our garage easy enough, but the question is it possible to put it back into the network at this time reasonably?
I think they're starting to work on that technology. I don't think it's readily available in a large scale utility that is really, that's available in the marketplace that we could go buy off the shelf and install.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because right now I have a smart meter, and in the afternoon sometimes they'll turn off my air conditioner for a while to try to balance the load or keep the load down, which makes sense. But at that point, I could turn on my car if I could just.
Yeah. Right. And I think people are willing to do that, but they don't want us to use 100% of your battery. They don't want you to deplete it.
No,
Right. So all that stuff has to get figured out and communicated to us. Oh yeah, we can use 10% of your battery between, at certain times when your battery's charged. All of that is not a simple, yes, no. It's a lot of logic has to get figured out on when we can use your battery, when we can't. Maybe you're going somewhere and you don't want us to use it today, but most days you can.
just don't plug it in.
Well,
I have that control.
you can not plug it in, but you want to charge it too
Well,
at
no,
times.
it's charged.
Right.
So,
Right.
be plugged.
Yeah, but yeah. So
Are there any other types of storage technologies that you see?
well, I mean, there's the pumped hydro storage that I've talked about. I mean, you know, there's different types of batteries. There's the lithium ion that I've mostly focused on. There's different new technology. There's the flow batteries that people have talked about. I mean, I think it's load control. I think you can kind of think of that as storage. If you can, you know, get someone to use the load, you know, when you want them to, and not use it at other times. I mean, that's effectively storage. And so I think it's more load control is probably where you get your biggest bang for your buck for storage today.
Flywheel and compressed gas.
Yeah. I mean, there is some other technologies out there like flywheel and compressed gas and stuff, but it's you know, you don't see it going in large scales, and it's, you know, because it's not cost effective. Bottom line today, if prices start increasing, you know, maybe that starts becoming cost effective.
Pat, has there been, you know, because right now, as Fort Collins is going to time of day rates, on the larger scale of the key accounts, it's still a coincident peak. Have you guys looked at adjusting that rate structure to either time of day, multiple time of day, or even real time, to really see if you can do load shifting? And with the key accounts, they are such large players, to see how they affect it. So like they're about 40% of the load across the four areas, the key accounts?
You know, we started having some discussions, internal discussions on how we might roll something like that out and have some conversations. I think to really effectively do it, you need more real-time pricing. Just, you know, a super on-peak and on-off-peak pricing. You know, ultimately, you're going to have some days that are different than you expect. And it would be nice to have more flexibility with those types of resources. But yeah, I mean, we're in the very early stages. The utilities are in the very early stages of trying to figure this out.
How much of the supply issue is because right now the renewables are very localized, and because there's not the transmission to bring it. And I'm going to go beyond Kansas and Miss Alberta, where the wind always seems to be blowing. I recognize it's another country.
Well, we need more. And I think there is diversity. There's more diversity. I didn't have much diversity in this because we don't have that many. We have some different units,
Right.
but solar is there's not quite as much diversity because it's typically, but to take advantage of that diversity, you need more transmission. And that's not easy to build either. I think the market would have helped us, you know, effectively, that's what you would have gotten, some of that diversity brought in, because you can then use, you know, there's a lot of wind in Kansas that you can bring in at times, you know, at a reasonable price and so forth, you know, and Texas, there's, you know, so I think you need a market to get that diversity, to really get it. I think we can do it without a market, but it's not as easy, and you won't get all of the benefits that you would if you had a market. But you need more transmission. I think in any case, you would probably need more transmission, which is not easy to build either.
Everybody loves renewables, nobody loves transmission.
Right. And then we're talking long lines, we're talking long, probably DC lines as well, so you don't have the losses and you have higher reliability.
Why aren't you considering a DC line for Wyoming?
Because it's expensive. You can afford to do DC lines, but you need 500 kV, and I think the break-even point is probably about 300 or 400 miles, and we got 20 miles.
Do you have a timetable for decommissioning your coal plants?
I don't think we have a timeline. I mean, we still, you know, and I can make my last pitch on my last slide is, you know, we're just in the process of starting a new IRP to try to come up with a new plan going forward, which will include, you know, talk about decommissioning our coal plants and when we're going to do that. And so we were going to be doing a very comprehensive study over the next couple years to try to take into account all of this information that I talked about, plus other information, and come up with a new plan. And there'll be plenty of opportunities for the public to weigh in and comment on it.
What's an IRP?
Integrated Resource Plan. So we're going to be doing a comprehensive integrated resource plan for our portfolio and try to figure out where we want to go over the long term.
I mean, we already know that the CRES plants are very expensive. I mean, they're really not efficient. It's not an efficient resource at all. Rawhide is much more efficient. The combined is already a very substantial,
Yep.
resource, and certainly Rawhide's not going to be going away soon, even if the CRES plants can
Yeah.
be decommissioned soon.
And that will definitely be something we will look at. And we could accommodate more renewables as we reduce, if we could get out from the coal plant, those plants, Craig units. But our problem is we're a minority owner. We can't, if we walk away, it's probably still not going to shut down. Because we're only, we're 18% owners of those 2 units. So we're a minority owner, and
It'll probably accelerate their shutdown, even if it doesn't result in a
Right.
legal shutdown.
but we have contractual obligations as well under that. So I mean, it's definitely going to be included in the plan. It's definitely something we want to take a hard look at to see when we could shut those down. And we're looking at options to try to figure out ways to shut them down earlier. I don't think I'm telling you any surprises there. I mean, we'd like to accommodate more renewables, and that's one way to accommodate more renewables. So I mean, we are pro renewables. Maybe not sound like it with the coal units, but we want to do more renewables. We just want to do it in a prudent way.
Do you have any dealings with Basin Electric?
We do transactions with Basin. I mean, yeah, they were part of the market that we were looking to participate in.
The reason I ask is I understand that they got into some kind of expenditure for something up in Douglas. Apparently it might have something to do with mining. And it got stranded, and I think they were laying off 30% of their labor force to pay for this.
Yeah.
And my uncle lives next to about a couple miles south of the plant, so this was just basically Wyoming news. And if somebody's got that much stranded assets, it seems like they can turn them on, and you could probably make a fair deal for the power coming out of it.
Yeah,
Not knowing any more than
I don't know. I mean, I heard that kind of story, what's going on, but I don't really know the specifics behind it and really exactly what.
All I got was rumor, but
Yeah.
it's fairly significant.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know a lot about that though. But I mean, there are utilities that are, that have invested in a lot of coal plants recently and are really, in trouble. I mean, as a result. We've made good decisions along the way, smart decisions. The coal we did do is 30 years ago, and it's mostly paid for. So, we've made smart decisions along the way. We want to continue to make smart decisions going forward as well. Another question?
If you got to 100% renewable, could you turn off your hydro and turn it back on?
No, I mean, the hydro we have is under contract with WAPA, and they have flow requirements on the rivers that they have to meet, and so it's really not that flexible. There's a little bit of flexibility in it, but it's not very flexible, and it's basically an around-the-clock block schedule with a little bit. But I mean, we're talking just a couple percentage up and down above that.
So they're running the base load, you're saying, basically.
They're basically a base load. A little more during the spring when the water is heavier, but it's a flatter schedule. And a little less in the fall, and average in the summer is kind of how that schedule works.
And as sort of a follow-on to that, any feel for what's going to be happening as the stream flows change significantly from their historical stream flows? Seasonal and...
Yeah, I mean, that's an issue that WAPA deals with, and they tell us what they can give us, what they have the right obligations for. If they can't flow the water, or if they have some restrictions, they have an obligation to go buy it in the market and replace it for us. But it's really they manage that. We really don't get too involved in that. So, I mean, that,
Pat, thanks so much for coming, unless there's any more
all
questions.
right, thank you.